Hey there, welcome to Games Over Coffee Consulting. People give me their games and I give feedback on their game design. My name is Devon and today we're talking about Netherguild by David, this name, which I will not try to pronounce. Today is a bit strange because not only do I not have any coffee with me, which what the heck, this game design in this game is really good. And I feel like there's not really anything more we can do to the game design to make it better. So this one's going to be a little bit different from my other videos. The three things I want to cover are the player character, the difficulty curve, and the graphic design. The player character. So what do we mean by player character? We mean the person that the player is playing as, basically. I don't ever think that this is something that's a requirement in a game. In fact, I like it a lot when the player character is removed from the game and it feels like you're just interacting with the world as you, kind of like a roller coaster tycoon, where you're just managing a place and you're not really seen in the game like as an avatar or anything like that. You're just managing everything. And none of the people inside Roller Coaster Tycoon are ever talking to you. There's prompts and stuff. It's like showing you that this is a game, this is a simulation, you are just managing it all. And I think that's awesome. Like, if you've seen my video about why breaking the fourth wall is a good thing for games, that's the whole idea of the player getting more immersed into a game when they're not seeing themselves in it. And it sounds weird, but that's what that video explains. I don't think it's a real issue, but maybe it is to you, the developer, because I don't personally feel like there is an issue here. There might be a slight disconnect with the way that you're talking to the player. Maybe that's the reason. If you feel like there's a disconnect here, if you feel like the player needs to feel themselves inside the game, then you can do that. So the communication here kind of reminds me of that game called Reigns by Devolver Digital. The idea in that game is that you play as a king and you're trying to make a bunch of decisions for your kingdom. You can tell by the communication in the game, everybody who's talking to the player is treating them as the king. They're reiterating the idea that the player is a character in the game, although they're not represented in the game as a king, right? You don't actually see your character. It's just you take on the role of that character. You can give the player any type of role that you want, just depending on what you want to do. In this instance, you could have the player be a king. They could be a head of the military somehow. They can be some sort of commander, something like that. It doesn't matter what they are. As long as you are communicating with them in the way that you would communicate with that character, then they have a character. That's all you really need. Depending on the type of experience that you want the player to have, maybe you want them to be closer to your story. Maybe you want them to be a little bit more separate from the story. I noticed when I was playing the game, I did get attached to the team members because I'm playing with them the whole time, right? I'm the one who's upgrading them. I'm telling them when to heal, and where to go and stuff like that. And that's what was in my mind. The less connected I was with everyone, the idea that they weren't talking to me per se, it kind of made me feel a little bit better if they died, right? So if they died in there, it didn't really get to me that much because I wasn't represented inside the game. And maybe that's what you want, maybe that's what you don't want. So it depends. So you, the developer, you mentioned the difficulty curve in your game and that it was maybe too slow or that maybe you were boring players. And according to your Steam reviews, I don't think that's the case. You have like nearly 100% of positive reviews and only one negative one that seemed to do with bugs in the game or something like that. But none of them had any complaints about, as far as I could tell, there was no complaints about the gameplay, about the way that it was paced. I think maybe some of the things that you're thinking of are probably just in your mind. You're maybe thinking, maybe players aren't going to find this too interesting. And if it's not interesting to you, maybe that's a different type of thing you should look at. But really, I mean, like I said, from the reviews, it looks really good. I was playing and I liked it quite a lot. Of course, I'm a beginner for this kind of tactics stuff, but I felt it was like really good. However, I do want to address the idea that you were talking about, where you have the first two levels in the game. As soon as you go into the cave and then you go deeper and then you have one more layer. right? So those first two layers are, like you said, kind of tutorialized, and they're meant to be more of a beginner kind of thing before you go on to the third level, which is a bit harder in the idea that there's more enemies and they're a lot tougher. And then you go beyond that, and there's even more, much tougher enemies, and the landscape changes a little bit. I think maybe what's happening here in your mind, maybe perhaps, is the idea that we're not progressing that much when we go from level 1 to level 2 and level 2 to level 3. That it becomes a samey type of experience because of the risk management and the item management that we have going on. That maybe, like me, I didn't make it past level 3 for a while. Like, there was a lot of times that I would get to level 3 and then I felt like, no, I have to go back to the surface to rebuy my stuff and try to, gear up better, and then go back in, only to be defeated more by enemies and then have to go back up before I get to level 3 again. And that's fine though. That's a push and pull experience. That's me and my gameplay feeling like I haven't pushed myself enough. That's no fault of the game, I don't think. However, I do want to talk about that idea of progression. I think maybe something that could be done here is looking at the game Crypt of the Necrodancer. That's one of my favorite roguelike dungeon crawlers. The whole idea of the game being focused on music, and what happens is that you are going deeper, kind of like your game, going deeper into the dungeon. Because the game is rhythm-based, the whole idea is that it's focused on music. So the song that's playing is very much an identifier to where you are, right? You hear the music and you immediately understand where you are and what's happening around you. And as soon as you beat that single surface and you go deeper down the stairs, then the music changes and the tempo changes. And suddenly you understand that you're in somewhere different, and the progression in your mind has been achieved, and you think, all right, I'm in level 2 now, right? It's very much a mental thing. I don't think it says level 2 anywhere like that. It might do that, I don't remember, but I remember that because I'm so focused on the music, that the idea that it changed as I went to level 2 and then level 3 and level 4, that is very interesting to me, and it allows me to understand and identify progression in my mind. So the thing I would want to see in your game is when we look at the thing that the player is focused on the most, which is traversal. So when you're going everywhere and when you're looking at everything, what you're seeing mainly is shapes, hallways, and colors, right? That's the thing that's in your brain. I imagine that making the second level of the game a different color, or making it filled with different types of objects or something like that, would make the player understand that they're progressing more when they get down a level. And I think what that would do is it would lessen the idea of this samey experience. That would make the player feel like they're progressing more. Also, you have the map that shows up just before you go into the cave. And in that map, you have a large blank space that has a little icon showing where you are or where you've been. While that whole blank space is there for a reason and shows the player that there might be more levels as they keep going, the idea that they're not seeing those levels doesn't really provide me with anything, right? What I'd like to see is some sort of outline or some sort of perhaps ghosting image or something that shows there are multiple levels here and you're only so far. I would like to see that, and that would make this mental idea of progression, I think, appeal more. And everyone who gets to level 2 who then says, I'm not sure if I like this game, they can see that they haven't gone that far into the game yet. But again, the idea of changing the atmosphere when you get down to level 2 would make the player feel like it's not the same experience over and over. If you're changing up those kinds of things. Also, the idea of changing up the types of enemies per level, I think, would do a lot also. And that brings me to the graphic design. The graphic design, I think, was probably the biggest issue that I saw within this game. It's not huge. I wouldn't say it's game breaking. Obviously, like I said, you have a lot of positive reviews. I think it's a great game. But as far as things that you can improve, I think this is the thing that I saw the most apparent that could be improved. It's difficult sometimes if you just don't, haven't seen a bunch of graphic design, but I think this game is really well organized. Like I've said before, like the game design I think is really good. The idea that you tutorialize everything, the idea that you have menus in their respective boxes, the idea that you have shapes that are very specific to the types of items that you have different colored words, you have different placements of things. Everything's really well organized for the idea. I mean, you have a ton of stuff in this game. There's a lot of management going on. And the idea that I wasn't getting lost at all, I think is a really good thing. There's something that I want to call the glance test. This is not really what the glance test is, what I'm about to say. Glance test has more to do with slides and whatnot. Whenever I was going through menus or something like that in this game, when I was going through the inventory and whatnot, whenever I looked at the screen, I couldn't immediately tell what was what, right? As soon as I looked more into it and I started seeing where the words were and what they were saying, I started to understand. I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, that's the item description, and that's the power that it has, and that's the other thing that it does. And I started to understand after reading it, but right there was no immediate recognition as soon as I looked at it. So that's something that I would want to call the glance test. But I think something that could improve that is improving the visual hierarchy here. And what I mean by that is in graphic design, if you look at visual hierarchy, actually I have a link in the description from interactiondesign.org where they talk about the UI type of design in games and stuff like that, and not just games, but like menus and for websites and things. Graphic design is a huge subject that covers everything from print media to digital to interactive. Visual hierarchy needs are different depending on what you're doing, but I do believe the size of the text and the color of the text is something that you should pay more attention to when it comes to creating more menus and creating slides for your like little item descriptions and stuff like that. Just so that when I'm looking at something, I can immediately recognize it from like a glance. And the reason why you want to do something like this is because you want to get the mental load off of the player, right? You want them to focus on what it is that you want them to focus on. If they have to keep thinking to do a basic task in the game, that's going to slow them down and it's going to make them bored. And that's something that you don't want to do. I think that is about it. I hope that what I've said has helped in some way. I know this is a little bit different from my regular videos. And for the dev, if you do have like a different type of vision in your mind and you want to submit this game again sometime in the future, that's totally fine. This goes to all the developers out there. If you feel like you want something more with your game, if you submitted a game to me before and you're just like, I don't know if we touched on this, maybe you want to go to the Discord. In the Discord, by the way, we do have a lot of feedback that we get from other developers. So if you have a game and you don't want to really submit, you don't want to be like, yeah, I don't know if I want him to look at it, but there's some other developers maybe. Go to the Discord. We have some great people in there that like to check stuff out. So that's it. That's all we got here. I'm very sorry I don't have any coffee. I'm very mad about that. I'm very angry. You can see how angry I am. Thank you so much for watching. I'll talk to you guys later.